Hi everyone, it's me again, and Gus is sleeping on the bed like he works 26 hours a day with 6 kids. That's our background again today. When I grow up, I want to sleep as intensely as this dog does. Today, we're going to talk about Matt Rife's sort of downfall on TikTok. We'll also delve into a little bit of kind of talking about comedy as a concept, context around jokes, and fighting with the plastic surgeons on TikTok, and also the Jordan Peterson interview, because Chad and Marie Forcino, you put your videos out too early, so I will now be able to get views because of the Jordan Peterson podcast. That's a joke. I'm just joking. Not everything's about that. I'm just being silly. If I sound weird in this video or the audio's a bit funny, you notice this is all ASMR-y again, you know? Because a certain little guy who's sleeping like he has 6 kids ate the pop filter. I had a really hard week, okay? And he decided to make it a little bit sillier. Anyway, my pop filter's broken. So now we have just this one, and we'll see how that really does anything for us. Links, source of ways to support the channel, including Amazon, Patreon, YouTube memberships, all that kind of stuff, all down below, along with the links to the makeup that is on my face. Based on the feedback from the post about Every Jewels, I will keep it until the end of the month, get feedback again, and then decide that way, because it was very mixed. So that's where I'm at right now. So they'll be there for now, but I'm not really going to do the community tab post or anything like that. So that's where that is. Parts of the video, 3 parts. Initial controversy. Part 2. Plastic surgeon TikTok enters the chat. Pat 3, Matt Rife and Jordan Peterson Cope podcast. So we got a pretty fun video today. Let's see. Every time I want to say let's make it short, it's 45 minutes long. So let's just see where this goes. So part 1, the initial controversy. Actually, before we get into that, also thank you to my members and patrons. Currently, names on screen. Now, for real, let's get into part 1. So Matt Rife is a comedian that has been somewhat popular for the past few years. For example, there's clips from 2018 that show him on this sort of comedy show thing with Zendaya, trying to make her laugh. So he's existed in the public eye for quite some time. He says he started doing stand-up comedy at 15, and he is currently 28 years old. Matt Rife really blew up recently to a whole different scale because of TikTok clips of him doing crowd work, often specifically crowd work involving women. Matt Rife is the sort of college frat guy type, you know, who grew up like watching iDubbbz videos and SJW cringe compilations and wants to be cool for the boys, and, you know, was deemed above average on the conventionally attractive scale. And given the approachable nature of his comedy and this crowd work, along with this so-called attractiveness, this garnered him a pretty dedicated but predominantly female audience. Now, this audience had been supporting him for quite some time. He even says in interviews and things like that that his audience is predominantly female, and he knew that. And with this, he makes this joke where he opens up for his Netflix special, and I'm going to be stealing the clips from Marie Forcino's video because she's figured out how to edit them without the copyright, so I'm just going to steal hers, because if she didn't get copyrighted, I'm not going to either. So the opening of Matt Rife's Netflix special has been circulating on TikTok, where he makes a joke in relation to mocking a waitress with a black eye. His friend goes, oh, well, she should stay in the kitchen if she looks like that. And then he goes, well, if she was cooking, then she wouldn't, if she was good at cooking, she wouldn't have been in this place. Cringe. Like, it's not even really funny. Like, people are upset about this joke because typically when a joke like this is made, the expectation to a certain degree is to be somewhat constructive about it. In being constructive, I mean at least attempt to point out that it's bad. Instead, he brings up this point with his friend that she, as I mentioned before, she should have just hidden in the kitchen. Now I'll put the actual joke in, but trigger warning for DA, obviously.
I've only been to Baltimore one time. I ate lunch there, and the hostess who like seats you at the restaurant had a black eye. A full black eye. And it wasn't like, what happened? It was pretty obvious what happened.
Matt's friend expressed that he felt bad for the hostess, but they should have kept her in the kitchen.
And my boy who I was with was like, yeah, I feel bad for her, man. I feel like they should put her in the kitchen or something where nobody... when nobody has to see her face, you know?
To which Matt joked that if the hostess knew how to cook, she wouldn't have the black eye to begin with.
Yeah, but I feel like if she could cook, she wouldn't have that black eye.
What?
The backlash got to Matt Rife very, very quickly, and he responded via an Instagram story. Essentially, it had a link to what appeared to be a sort of apology, but instead was a link to a parody website for special needs helmets. He proceeded to say to Jordan Peterson, how instead of taking the time to acknowledge that it wasn't really funny either, he then says that people are psychotic for taking the screenshot from Instagram and putting it onto Twitter, because Instagram is a more personal app.
I also thought that most of the outrage was happening just on Twitter and TikTok. Like, Instagram's a far more personal app, I think. And so the fact that people even saw that and took it to other platforms, I thought was insane, but also proved my point even more that people who don't even like my comedy or have never even heard of me saw the outrage and my response to it and went, oh, that's actually funny.
Right.
I feel like the mental gymnastics for him all went into like the weird muscles in your jaw. And that's why his head makes it look like Optimus Prime. Look at me being like Matt Rife and laughing at my own joke before I finish it. Because that was also, a quick aside, something that I had trouble watching. I watched the stand-up special, by the way. And it's like, he literally can't get through a joke without laughing at it himself. On one hand, you're your biggest fan to a certain degree, especially when you're in comedy. But at the same time, when it's inaudible because of the coming through the mic, consider maybe altering that issue. TikToks then began to circulate, doubling down on their criticism of Matt Rife, starting with people that had used examples of somewhat offensive jokes that relate to women that do not simply dismiss them as human beings. I can have a couple of examples inserted now.
Yeah, when women masturbate, it looks like a samurai committing suicide. You guys pull your wand out of that velvet case, you know? I'm a disgrace to my family.
Saie, I don't know if you can tell by looking. They'll look at you and be like, I'm making them at night.
Then it moved on to criticizing his looks and what brought him to fame in the first place, such as the crowd work and dude bro charisma style comedy. And to end this particular part where we're just outlining things, I will speed run you through the special, that my opinion on how it went out. So even before the DV joke, I'm going to read these like verbatim, so I'm going to look. Even before the DV joke, this man can hardly get through one of his own jokes without laughing. Like he needs a pop filter because of how much he huffs into the mic.
It was like his favorite state, which, is a valid response unless you've been to Baltimore. Because, dude, the fuck is going on in Baltimore, dude? Bro, Maryland as a state cannot pick a tone, dog.
Second, there's a whole bit following the DV joke about crystal girls, which is an interesting parallel because the focus on the responsibility lost due to crystals is his biggest point, but men will literally commit DV because of sports games. Because he goes on and on about how like crystal girls are horrible because like something bad will happen and they'll be like, oh, Mercury's in retrograde, which I've never actually seen happen in real life. This is sort of more of a hyperbolic representation of these people. But then men, like, DV rates will double when like the World Cup happens because they can't control themselves because of people they've never spoken to and know nothing about, playing a game with other people they've never spoken to or know nothing about. So
If I hear one more person blame how their life is going on Mercury, I will kill you myself. Do you understand? You leave that goddamn planet alone. I'm so tired of you ladies blaming your poor decision-making skills on planets that don't even know you.
there's also a bit that dragged on for way too long about how much he loves old people, which spanned from starting from someone thinking that his John Lennon tattoo was Harry Potter. So that got him so upset. And in his britches, if you will, is that the word I'm looking for? Is that the word for undie in like British you made it like a 15-minute bit because someone didn't recognize your tattoo. Somebody who, by the way, sounds like they weren't alive at the same time as him. I get it that, like, you know, some people should be able to be identified, but at the same time, boomers will do this all the time too. They'll be like, this actor from 1940, and you're like, I don't know who that is. And they'll get all mad at you, and then you're like, who's Louis Tomlinson? And then they just like short circuit. It's like, you know, if you look at things like record sales and tour numbers that like they're comparable and like the level of fame is comparable, it's just because you didn't care about them. That's the issue. So essentially, like, Matt Rife is really just like a boomer in a 28-year-old's body. That's what I kind of realized throughout this special.
Like 5 months ago, I got a tattoo of John Lennon on the back of my arm, and it's pretty fucking obviously John Lennon. Like, it's a good tattoo. And as soon as I posted on Instagram, everybody was like, he's a Harry Potter fan? I was like, fuck these kids, dude. That is so disrespectful to one of the greatest musicians of all time. Like John Lennon got fucking Avada Kedavra in his back and that's why he's not here? No. Same glasses, but he's the boy who didn't live. I know. And if that made you sad, you're my audience. Good. I like you a lot. Good. It also breaks my heart. That's good. I hate young people, dude. But there's really no middle ground. I hate young people and I fucking love old people.
Next, there's a super weird part. I also like skipped a ton. There's a whole really ableist thing about a kid with Down syndrome and his private parts. And I'm just like, let's just ignore that, please. There's a super weird part about how he thinks he will have a disfigured son because of bad karma. This is after calling Crystal Girls stupid for an entire segment, but then says he believes in ghosts and monsters and like karma as a concept. Then he makes a school pew-pew joke and then says, just check if you're still fun. Then I swear to God, the last 35 minutes or so, and I said, I swear half of the special is him complaining about people not liking him on social media. I think my favorite part is 20 minutes into said social media rant. He's talking about Twitter and how awful it is. Nobody will ever thrive on Twitter. He essentially talks about how he like will bully people on Twitter if they're mean to him first, and goes, well, you hit me first, but then again, you have the platform with, you know, 1/100,000th. They have like 1/100,000th of your following, and you're still weaponizing that sort of audience that can go against them while they don't have that same power to you, but you won't acknowledge that because as long as they did it first, then you can do anything you want and it's fine. That's kind of the thought process he has. Into this rant says, I don't care what anyone says about me.
I know that's a harsh thing to say to somebody, but the way I see it, nobody who's a good person and actually contributes anything positive to society is ever going to go out of their way to leave a negative comment under something you have been so brave as to create and share with the rest of the world. And we just don't need people like that around. Everybody wants to get their lick in, right? Because the internet is full of people who have negativity towards themselves that they have to project onto other people. So this is their opportunity, because that's your punishment. If you ever get in trouble on the internet, your punishment is that people can say anything they want to you. Anything, even if it's way worse than what you said to get in trouble in the first place, man. It's impressive. And ultimately, that stuff never bothers me. Like, look, you're never gonna hurt my feelings, okay? I've been dead inside for so long. Like, my plane crashed a long time ago, and I didn't step over the bag, emotionally speaking, you know what I mean? So...
yeah, no. I don't even know what else to say to that. It's like, girl, no, that's not true. That more or less leads into the end of the special. There is one, I saw this video. This video keeps coming up on my YouTube recommended. I've never actually watched it, but it's called like Watching Amy Schumer Until I Laugh, and it's 58 minutes long. That is me with this, and my video would have been like 46 minutes, you know, because he makes one funny joke about eating the booty of a Catholic girl, and it was something like, you know, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost or something. And, like, I thought that was funny because it's like a butthole pun, you know? Like, you can still talk about your sex life. You can still talk about women in a certain context, and it can still be funny. You don't have to try to make us feel bad for you for seeing a woman that got victimized. Because that's very different. Will he ever get that? No, because he did a whole, like, I'll get to that soon, Cope podcast about how much he hates people criticizing him in any capacity. Then it leads to the end of the special. He drops the mic being like, but I only do crowd work, right?
Well, what do I know? I only do crowd work, right?
No, but you could have kept 97% of the special in the drafts. So maybe you should have stick to crown work. But we'll talk more about that in his cope with Jordan Peterson. So now we move into part 2. Plastic surgeon TikTok enters the chat. So Matt Rife's looks are a big point of discussion, as I was mentioning earlier, and this so-called cancellation, as he and Jordan define it, really led to like people kind of fixating on those things. People in their TikToks were pointing out that Matt had kind of a strange looking face when you looked at certain pictures more closely. And when I mean weird or strange, I mean kind of like in an uncanny valley kind of way, or like you can see that looks like there's almost like filler migration. And like, so I also have, big apple cheekbones and a decent kind of cut, right? See how when I go like this, you can see like a little ball kind of like that. His is like so intense and very centered to a certain point. So a lot of Botox will try to mimic like the apples of your cheek thing. But when they go like this, you see how the line goes really wide? They tends to be like too concentrated. And that's kind of the thing that people were kind of fixating on. So then they started looking at the drastic shifts in his appearance from when he started to kind of, I don't know how else to say it, but like actually become famous in like 2017 to now. And obviously, like, he's had veneers. Like, that's like the clearest one that's like without argument, whether that be veneers or caps, but dental work. But then people started pointing out specifics, specifically relating to like his jawline. That was a big one. So now this is where the plastic surgeons come in. So not just, and those of you will know in a second, the guy who was skipping down the hallway to Bridget Mendler's Hurricane, but also Dr. Miami, which, you know what? Hate how you want to hate. I like Dr. Miami. Dr. Miami is camp to me. I think Dr. Miami is camp. When he's making joke videos about being sued by Kris Jenner because of BBL accusations and like a lot of these like other claims that I think are quite funny. Here's the thing though. If he did something bad and I don't know about it, please don't get mad at me. I just see him come up on my FYP sometimes. Okay, that's how I know Dr. Miami. I also know Dr. Miami for doing like half of the Teen Mom 2 cast BBLs. Anyway, there is this sort of reality that plastic surgery is associated with women and aesthetics. This is often the case with set aesthetics. While for men, there seems to be the only acceptable focus on aesthetics is like hair maintenance and going to the gym. The video drops of the plastic surgeon on TikTok skipping down the hallway to Bridget Mendler's Hurricane. And I'll insert it now without audio because otherwise I'll get claimed. On the TikTok, Matt commented this. Essentially saying that, fake medical information is a law, is illegal, even though the guy didn't mention his name, didn't even like imply really that it was him, just besides the fact of the use of the word jawline. But Zac Efron also has like kind of a weird jawline that looks plastic surgery-y if you wanted to defend himself. This is super important for people's criticism and view of his character, because when you look at the lens of Matt Rife calling anyone who doesn't find his jokes to be like overly sensitive, then a guy makes a very mild, topical, and pretty unique joke to then have Matt shit pissing and crying. It really makes it look like that you clearly just have incredibly low confidence. A whole new spiral of anti-Matt Rife TikTok began as a result of the plastic surgeon video, and how clearly he was owned by him. He was just bodied by this guy.
Just got in a fight with his plastic surgeon. The guy that makes TV jokes got in a fight. Wow. Kind of a strange one, because the surgeon made this video after the backlash. What did the video say? Me, after creating the greatest jawline ever seen just for my client to get cancelled right after. What's that got to do with Matt Rife? Doesn't it? The surgeon didn't even use his name. So why was Matt upset? Everyone was razzing him by tagging him and implying that he was the client. That's a bit funny. I think he got offended by the joke because he commented lying about medical history is illegal, FYI. I'm the guy that told his fans to buy special needs helmets because they can't take a joke. He since deleted the comment, but the kicker is that's not even his plastic surgeon. So this actually was just a joke. Yeah, but don't worry, the surgeon feels bad, so he sent him an apology package. Really? Containing what? A helmet? No. It says artificial selection on the side. Please. And an extra large chin strap. Because if he protects it for the next 6 to 8 weeks, maybe he'll be able to take something on the chin.
Now, I'm gonna post a TikTok now that also just explains why it's so funny and topical.
Just in case you were wondering, Matt Rife would like you to know that this joke is very serious and not funny at all. Yes, the same Matt Rife who made this painfully cliche and unfunny misogynist joke followed it with an apology that was an equally unfunny but this time ableist joke. I will of course point out the irony in somebody who insisted that people just can't take a joke not being able to take a joke. I don't think any of us are surprised that Matt Rife can dish it out but he can't take it. But what makes this joke so much better? So I mentioned before that Rife's joke is a cliche. Jokes about men hitting their wives were all the rage on TV in the 1950s. This joke, though, is very topical. So much so that it's a joke that couldn't have even been made 2 weeks ago. And of course, the target of his joke makes it fun. Punching up. Humbling somebody who is rich and powerful and feels like he can speak without impunity or consequences. That is always hilarious. Rife's unself-consciously hypocritical responses just makes it so much better. Say nothing of the visual humor. We open with a surgeon deep in thought reflecting on his greatest accomplishment. And then a sudden transition to a whimsical, ludicrous little skip down the hallway. How else can you respond to the self-immolation of your greatest creation than with absurdity? And Rife actually adds another layer to the joke with this particular response. Because he doesn't come right out and say, this is not my surgeon. He is taking credit for somebody else's work. That would require admitting that he's had work done. Rife's vanity is the real punchline here. Speaking of punches, you'd think somebody with a jaw like that would be able to take a hit.
This only instilled further, and this is where every other commentary girly stopped because it hadn't come out yet, but I got my grubby little fingers on it. Because now, not only do we have the TikTok comment that he sneaky deleted, and the stupid Instagram response and all this stuff, we also have Tana Mojo comment from a few months ago, before the cancellation, if you will, about Matt Rife and jealousy. So I'll insert that as well.
People only hate somebody they're jealous of. And I've been guilty of hating people. And when I really sat back and thought about it, it was because I was jealous of where that person was in their life. I thought like maybe they got an opportunity that I should have gotten. So now that I'm doing so much better for myself, I don't have that energy towards anybody. I really don't. Like I'm happy and very lucky to be where I'm at right now. So I don't have like a beef with anybody. If I was gonna fight somebody, it might be like, I don't know, maybe like Will Smith or something. He seemed to have a good right hook.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He hates jokes.
No, I love Will Smith, but I'm like, hey, A, he's in great shape. It's a great competition, and B, he hit Chris Rock. So as part of the comedy community, I feel like that's not a bad
That's your
choice.
guy. That was a really, really good, well-rounded answer. I'm trying to wrap my head around. Do you think people who hate Osama bin Laden are jealous of him?
Yeah, of course. Of course. They're mad that he wasn't the one calling the shots.
So now with all of these things, he looks even worse because he copes with Jordan Peterson for over an hour. And that's where we get to part 3. I literally titled this Matt Rife x Jordan Peterson cope. There are 2 things in this life that are guaranteed. 1, we will all die someday. 2, in every controversy around a man being criticized, especially if it's for their content or sense of humor, being too edgy, and especially when it's revolving around making fun of women or marginalized people, there will be a slew of young men with the same level of very low self-confidence and zero introspection, riding and dying for a person they've never heard of, just for the sake of being contrarian. I'll put a picture now of people commenting on TikToks being like, I didn't like him before this. You only like him because he projects the same weakness that you have. You're cringe. Now, we go to, really quick, actually, for those of you who do not get enough from me detailing his set, there are other videos that comment on this sort of thing. If you don't like mine enough, there are other videos. The main point I want to make, though, when I was talking about my synopsis, was the basis of that special was out of a strong sense of insecurity and defensiveness. The set consisted of attempting to appease older generations in hopes of receiving less backlash for his jokes and negativity overall. If you can take one message from what I do on the Mika's Rhetoric channel, is I like to try to find people that cope with backlash by being horrible to people and then pointing out that that's what they're doing. That the reason why they're acting in this certain way is to create shields to prevent future criticism. That's what Marissa Matthews does. That's what Amberlynn Reed does. That's what Matt Rife does. That's what Sneeko does. That's what all these people who create these incredibly dense echo chamber platforms are doing, because they're so sensitive to anyone being critical to them that they literally cave in at the possibility of being criticized. There's also that whole point of him asking people if they're still fun based on if they laughed at a poorly timed school pew-pew joke. And also the whole section about people not liking him on social media, which he clearly notices that he is coming off as whiny, because then he tosses in I don't care defense. To defend my opening line about the fan base of men that desire to be contrarian above all else, Matt Rife appeared on the young male cope broadcast. Well, second to Joe Rogan as far as male cope goes, but the Jordan Peterson podcast. So this was just Matt Rife having a huge ego and decided to put his head even further up his own ass just to cope. He even says in the podcast that he doesn't know that much about Jordan Peterson, but he just thinks he's well-spoken.
I'll be truthfully honest, I haven't done extensive research into everything you've done, but I find you to be a very kind man and very well-spoken and someone who stands on their morals and the realism of society today. And I think that is incredibly rare, and I just highly appreciate you.
So to start already, we have a callback to my previous comment about Matt thinking that he's the funniest person he's ever heard, because he's laughing at himself again immediately. And it's like, you can laugh at yourself, but when you're giggling like a little schoolgirl so hard that you're like incomprehend, like you cannot be comprehended, it's like, then you might just be a little bit cringe. So Jordan Peterson quickly, with swiftness, goes on a huge rant about how apologizing is just caving into people who lack intellect, that are simple-minded. And by the way, Jordan Peterson's only premise for defending this is that they disagree with him. And he's smart because he has a doctorate.
Why did you decide to take the strategy that you took? Why weren't you like racked with guilt and apologetic? And
because it's just comedy. I'm just doing what's funny to me. It's never any deeper than that, nor should it be for anybody. I'm saying things that my imagination drums up, that makes me happy, release endorphins in my head, that makes my life happier. And all I do is share those thoughts with other people in hopes that it makes their life easier.
I know it's not a doctorate, but as of Wednesday, December 5th, if all goes well, which it should, it's a 10-minute presentation, I'll have a master's degree, teaching certificate, college diploma, and bachelor's degree. And that's not what makes me smart. So, because the things that Jordan Peterson say, if you take them linguistically and you break them down, he says like 4 words in a sentence of 30 words that are all just joining terms like however, like transition words, you know? And what he says is just nonsense. Like, if he ever tried to send like a text via like text to speech, it would be over for him. Matt Rife's defense about the jokes that he makes is that they release endorphins in his mind. And because he thinks it's funny, he shares his thoughts, and that's what matters. Despite what actually matters with comedy is other people thinking it's funny. And he somewhat concedes to that a little bit later down the line. These two cope lords are a match made in heaven in the way that they devalue the concept of criticism to people needing to just look at something else. You don't like what I'm doing? Then don't watch it.
Right. But that's the thing, is it's like whether you enjoy what I do or not, you don't even have to know it exists. If I'm your problem, if you and I are face to face and you have a problem with my comedy that I tell, that I admit to the world, right? If you just remove yourself from me, if you do something as simple as just turn around, there is an entire planet behind you for you to go explore and live the rest of your life. You don't ever have to think about me. You don't have to talk about me. I don't like screamo heavy metal music. Mm-hmm. Guess how often I think about it or talk about it? Mm-hmm. 0% of the time. Mm-hmm. You just remove yourself from the situation. I see no harm in trying to make people laugh as a general intention.
Because I'm never adapting to anything. Because you saying something to me, oh, I'm not listening. And I just want you to look away. That's it. That's like the whole thing. Genuinely, what is there to gain from seeing all criticism ever brought to you as being geared as just primarily and solely negative behaviors? Because in the Rulebook arguments, they have a whole section related to taking criticism. It's section 38, seek feedback and use it. Maybe you know exactly what you mean. Everything is clear to you. However, it may be far from clear to anyone else. Points that seem connected to you may seem completely unrelated to someone reading your essay or looking at your comedy thing. I talked about this in my Marissa Matthews video. I read the same excerpt. I've had students hand in essays and think it's sharp and clear, only to find that when they get it back, they themselves can barely understand what they were thinking when they wrote it. Their grades won't be very encouraging either. Writers at all levels need feedback. It is through others' eyes that you see best where you're unclear or hasty or just plain implausible or just plain unfunny. And I'm in sheer disbelief about the comment that Jordan Peterson says at one point. So really quick side tangent. I was scripting this and my next video while I was helping a friend write a paper. I was kind of just body doubling, and then I had her paper open and giving her little points throughout the process, right? And I literally like screamed when I heard this because Jordan Peterson says, and I've been putting clips through, I'll put this one in, that there is no one worse than the men that defend a woman without a cause. Like that there's no reason for a man to ever be feminist, to ever defend women in any capacity besides the fact that he just wants to sleep with them. Then the two men do what any men with no concept or grasp realistically on sociological or physiological adaptations compare everybody to orangutans. We're monkeys. I love that argument from we're either monkeys or we're at best we're Neanderthals. The orders that existed at those primitive points in evolution are the only ones that we actually have, and people going against them is unnatural to some aspect, despite it not causing truly negative things, besides men who have always been in dominant positions having to realize that other people are also human beings. Bridges this conclusion of like us being orangutans to like beta men.
I'll tell you a funny story that goes along with that. Okay. This is hilarious and so telling. So primatologists who studied orangutans figured out a long time ago that there are two variant male types of orangutan. Okay, so there's like, orangutans tend to hang around in trees, they're arboreal. But the males who become dominant in a given territory get so large, sort of like a linebacker in football, and they have these big fat pads around their face that are circular. They get so large they can't really go in trees anymore. And the females come to them. But then there are other males in the vicinity for who the primatologists thought were adolescents for a very long time because they look like adolescent males and they hang around in the trees. But they turn out to be, many of them, fully mature males whose development into the linebacker is forestalled by the fact that they're not at the top of the pecking order. Right, and so their strategy is sneaky rape. Jesus. Right. So it doesn't take much of an imagination to map that onto the, the feminist male who's so on the side of women that, he gets to be the friend who can entice some poor girl into bed when she's at her lowest point.
And like I said, Jordan Peterson is your uncle at Thanksgiving who's had 6 too many vodka crans. Or what do you drink at Thanksgiving? Like Grand Marnier coffees? I'm French, but, something along that line. And then Matt Rife says the line, which I was obsessed with. I kind of discovered upon Dane Cook and Dave Chappelle, who were the pinnacle of comedy at that time.
I didn't know comedy was a career or even a job until I was about 14. And I kind of discovered who like Dane Cook and Dave Chappelle were. And those guys were at the pinnacle of comedy at that time. So I just learned, I studied them, fell in love with the art form, and I started doing open mics when I was 15 after school on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And
so that's who he's basing his comedy off of, which I feel like this all makes more sense. Matt Rife makes a point to tell us that that he went to touch grass by going back to his hometown in Ohio and just complained about people in LA being on their phones. If you're touring so much, can't you just move? Because that's like, then don't look at it, Matt. If you don't like it, don't look at it. That's what you said. You should never conceptualize the world around you and actually be critical about what's there. You should just not look at it. But everyone's wrong except for you, Matt. That's the reality. They talked about how much they hated Twitter and how no one who ever thrives on it will be successful or happy in life. Again, just whacking each other's weenies, beating thy meats, you know what I'm saying? About everything they're saying to each other. Jordan Peterson says that essentially due to the woke moralists, Matt Rife is even smarter than most comedians because his jokes have to be only about being a white guy because you're no longer allowed to like make fun of like minority figures and things like that. Then Matt began to craft his ideal audience to describing it to Jordan as people who rejoice about how awful a situation is and the process of healing from that situation. He's not pointing out situations when we're talking about the DV joke, this is the context that he had. He's not pointing out how bad it is for her. He's pointing out how bad it is for him. That's the problem. It is a satirically weak premise of looking at that hardship when we're talking about that joke specifically. Because at the core of the hardship, it just belittles those who are affected. And it makes you look pompous and entitled. Because you're not saying the issue is her getting hit. You're saying the issue is you having to look at her after her being hit. Those are two very different things. And then I was gagged again when Matt and Jordan were literally beating each other's weenies about how good of listeners they are to each other. Then Matt just says, as long as one person laughs, the joke is funny. Therefore, it is effective comedy. It's giving Deaf Noodles from last year. I also wonder if he's just counting himself. Also, side note to the arguments about offense, I'm not offended by him and this joke. Rather, I'm annoyed at how a low-hanging fruit joke for such a big special was something that he's so emotionally immature about the reaction to. That's what annoys me. Like, this whole podcast is just two people trying to make each other feel bad with coping that they can't handle a sliver of criticism, which to them is negativity in every context. Unless it's from people that adore them and it's seemingly formed it in a sort of compliment sandwich.
That's what great comedians do continually. And so I thought that's what you did with the domestic violence joke. And you added some nice kitchen-related misogyny to that very rapidly, which was good.
It's a modern twist on an old joke. You know what I mean? It was a real circumstance that happened. I'm sorry. An exaggerated instance that really happened. And I went, this is a classic joke. Why not give my own personal modern twist on it and move on? The joke's like a minute and 30 seconds and people were like, all he did was bash women for an hour. I go, did you get to the cum? There's so much cum in the middle of the show. Then we talk about airplanes and ghosts and monsters. It was such a minute thing that I go, hey, and I purposely did it first in the show to go, hey, just so you know, this is the kind of humor I like to tell. And if it's not for you, you are so more than welcome to turn off the TV right now. I don't want you to fall in love with me and then paint a wrong perspective of who you think I am. And then halfway through the show, he goes, oh, he ruined it. I'd rather tell you up front, like, hey, we're going to do some dark humor because this is how I personally.
Jimmy Carr does that too. He often starts out with.
Jordan says to wait out the cancellation and that the social conflict will favor them in the long run. Very weird to say that they experience internet hate and cannot accept any of the consequences behind it, but insist on there needing to be real-life consequences with people that they interact with. But then again, Jordan Peterson is literally the king of bringing every real-life problem he has onto the internet, such as, for example, when the Canadian psychological board was like, hey, you can't release comments about your previous patients and you can't act this way as a licensed psychologist in Canada because of like medical rights. The very, very last quote rings so true to the contrarian fan base that I mentioned it earlier in this video, where Matt's like, oh, people found me not liking the woke culture and that's why they like me now. Then you're not funny. You're literally just appeasing their agenda. That's it. That's what that means. If you didn't really know that, I'm here to tell you because like clearly there's like something not coming through here.
One group of people, whatever you want to call them, people love to make it about the left or the right or whatever. I'm a very unpolitical person. I don't really use those terms, so they might not be correctly used here. But say the left is so outraged about something, the right instinctually goes, you're being so ridiculous about this. If you hate this, I'm going to support this because I see nothing wrong with it. So in doing that, they've completely balanced each other out.
Right. Well, and you probably brought your work to the attention of a whole demographic that wouldn't have necessarily known who you were.
So many people commenting, I didn't know who this kid was. I actually didn't like him before, but I like this joke that he told. Or I dislike you so much that the enemy of my enemy is not my friend.
Right.
And with that, we conclude the video. So here concludes the edutainment, I guess, breakdown of the whole Matt Rife dilemma and the Jordan Peterson podcast. Links, sources, ways to support the video, including any affiliate links, memberships, Amazon wishlist, the whole nine, all down below, along with an email to suggest content in a longer form. And I don't know when you're seeing this, but as of December 5th, I should have a master's degree, so we're going to do a little celebration type deal, and I'll figure that out in due time while I cope with the $10,000 of damage from the guy hitting my car. Yo, okay, bye, see you around.
Thank you for asking this. This is a very important question. Joe Biden, 5G, green M&M, vaccine, oat milk, estrogen, Trisha Paytas, in that order.